I try to really develop my leadership and communication and management skills by participating in these organizations that have very different goals that often align with mine. So I was able to develop all these skills of like working together. I was able to seek collaborations that really helped me develop collaboration skills. So these are all the things that you can even do outside the engineering field to kind of develop those soft skills. And once you develop those soft skills, that's how you make yourself marketable.
Moving forward.
So welcome to B-Xcellent podcast. I'm the host, Dr. Brandon Harrison Smith. Today, I have a guest here. He's actually a grad student here at Purdue University, Chemical Engineering Department. And his name is, and I apologize if I butcher this, and if I do, please correct me, Sopuruchukwu.
Yeah.
And give me the last name again.
Ezenwa.
Ezenwa.
Yes.
That's as best as I can do it. I understand we had a conversation earlier about how it's the dialect a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so where are you actually from?
So my story pretty much starts from Nigeria.
Nigeria. Okay.
That's where I pretty much spent the first 18 years of my life.
Okay.
And I'm from the southeastern part of Nigeria, pretty much from the Igbo land. And I moved to the US in 2014. And I moved to Boston to study at Tufts University. And
what was the university again?
Tufts University.
Yeah.
It's in Medford, Somerville, and pretty much spent my 4 years there. And then I came over to Purdue, and I'm glad to share more on any of those parts.
Okay. So what major did you take up when you were in Boston?
So when I was at Tufts, I was studying chemical engineering.
Okay.
I pretty much had a good idea that I wanted to do chemical engineering. Okay. So my story is a little bit unique because I finished high school in 2012 and I wasn't very quite sure what I wanted to do. So I was still 16 then, and I hopped into university in Nigeria doing petroleum engineering. But, we had a lot of academic strikes and I was at home like most of the time. So I decided to just, give it up and spend some time pretty much putting an application to come to the US, and I was able to get a scholarship. Yeah. But I decided that when I was going to come to the US, I wanted to study something more versatile, and that's how I ended up in chemical engineering.
Okay. Now that's great. I think to your point, I think sometimes students, we think we got to go straight in. After high school, we got to go straight into college. And I think to your point, it's good to take a little bit of time and know what you're going to college for. I think it can make the process easier. I think a lot of times students get here and you get to that first year of school and you're like, why am I here? I had a dream to be a doctor. I had a dream to be something, but now I'm not so sure. So I think it's actually pretty excellent that you took some time for yourself, figured it out, and then figured out where you wanted to go. All right. And so through that process, you decided that you liked the versatility and I guess the chemical engineering departments in the schools that you were looking at. And so that's why you came here. Now, before I get into your research, I guess, so did you always know you were going to pursue a PhD?
Let's say 3 years ago, if you asked me that question, I would tell you I wasn't sure.
Okay.
But somehow I went back to my college app and I found out that, I actually indicated that I wanted to do a PhD at some point.
Okay.
So I guess, a young me of 17 back then wanted to do a
ambitious.
PhD.
Yeah.
But I would say the decision became more reinforced in my undergrad because of the mentors I surrounded myself with. I spent more time pretty much interacting with professors than with some other students. So I just really enjoyed that, academic and collegial environment and decided I wanted to do a PhD.
Yeah, I think that's great. So what made you want to spend more time with the professors versus the other students and just enjoy the college life, of course?
Yeah, I'll say I lived multiple lives. I also had my time enjoying with other students.
He's like, I have fun. Don't say I was boring. But
I think what specifically attracted me to that was the fact that the people I worked with really enjoyed what they did. So my academic advisor, really enjoyed what he did. My research advisor and all of this in the undergrad, they really enjoyed what they did. They pretty much treated me like a PhD student because the person who I was doing research for came to Tufts in 2016, which was the end of my second year. So they treated me like PhD student. They pretty much valued my opinions, and I really appreciated that. I really appreciated the environment. So every chance I got to pretty much meet them every other day or every day, I just took it and I had my fun after all.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So your environment and the mentors and all that really influenced where you are right now.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. Now, I know it was the environment, but was there, and it seemed like you had a track to go all the way to chemical engineering from the beginning. What was it about chemical engineering that inspired you to go that direction versus, other directions?
So while growing up, one of the things that happens about with growing up in Nigeria is that you see that this is a country that is endowed with a lot of resources. And, we still struggle with, production of chemicals, production of energy. And, I really thought about these problems. Like these are what chemical engineers pretty much try to solve. So that was my initial push to study chemical engineering. And then you mentioned the versatility. I know chemical engineers that pretty much work in every profession you can think of, law, medicine, anything you can think of. So I decided I wanted to study something that would enable me really, become more versatile. But the other unique aspect of chemical engineering, and this is something you learn when you take your first class, is just about looking at processes from like a bigger picture, right? So you start by, there's this class called unit operations where you think about the whole system and just model it as blocks. You don't need to know what goes into the block, but being able to zoom out and look at the whole process and then later on start zooming into each process, that's something I really appreciated about chemical engineering. And that tool and that skill is very, very valuable in very, very different, disciplines that are other than chemical engineering.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you probably a hard question. And it's going to be a question that's probably going to put you in hot water. So what would you say is the difference for, students who don't know chemical engineering, but they do know chemistry? A lot of students do have chemistry in high school. What would you say is the biggest difference between chemistry and chemical engineering? Choose your words carefully, because
I'd say my own take is that one of the key differences is the math. Chemical engineering, I'd say there's a lot of math that is involved. So your math skills at least need to be decent enough. And even if it's not, there are definitely like tools and resources that you can use to brush up on the specific math that you need. The chemistry aspect of it comes in like bits and flavors at different points in time. When you go to grad school, for example, like my PhD research now, sometimes I kind of think myself more of like, sometimes I do some organic chemistry, sometimes I do more like reaction engineering.
I see.
So the chemistry is still important because you really get to, like learn some of the fundamentals of the reactions you study, the materials you make. Most of it is chemistry. But when it comes to the engineering side of things, you have to start thinking about, I'm going to scale this up. I'm going to do this on the more practical applications. What are some of these other concepts? We have this thing called reaction engineering, right? How do you model these things called like reactors and catalysts and all those? So you don't need to know any of those means, but there's a lot of math involved in those. And then there's the chemistry. So I'll say like the math is one thing that you can pretty much add to chemistry and then put everything together. And you pretty much find yourself in chemical engineering, provided you really get to understand other aspects, that all the other glues that hold chemistry and math and pretty much chemical engineering together.
All right. That's awesome. Now, so let's talk a little bit about your research. So what does your research entail?
So I'll speak about my research at a very high level, right? So at a very high level, I pretty much work with this material called catalysts. And what are catalysts? They pretty much make things go faster.
Absolutely.
And they also help you pretty much select to like one favorable outcome over another unfavorable outcome. So I work on pretty much like, how do you understand this catalyst? The chemical industry pretty much uses like catalysts. Like more than 90% of industrial processes use catalysts. So it's important that we try to understand, how do these materials that are the workhorses of production of energy, chemicals, like how do they come about? What are the specific properties that make them act the way that they do? So that's pretty much what my PhD research does. I try to investigate how these catalytic materials, affect, the sustainable energy and fuel production.
Okay, so it's kind of like an optimization problem a little bit.
One way it's an optimization problem. Another way it's more of like a fundamental study. Like let's try to like look at things on a very let's take a microscope and look at, what makes this act the way it is, because you cannot optimize something that you don't understand.
Absolutely.
Right. So we have to first understand it. And then when you understand the specific property that makes it behave the way it does, then you can now start thinking of, now I can make this better. So it's pretty much like two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's fantastic. So what's the ultimate goal here? So you get a PhD in chemical engineering. What's the ideal scenario? I know like graduating with PhD, it can be ambiguous. Like everybody's asking you, like, where are you going to go? And you're like, I don't know. It's like being selected for a sports team and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. But if you had your way, what would be the next move or what would be the ultimate goal? And you're like, I'm living my life right now.
So if everything fell into place, I'd say like my ultimate goal is to pursue a career in academia, pretty much doing some of the things I've enjoyed doing, which are, teaching, research, mentorship. And, I'm hoping to do this in like, chemical engineering field and try to pretty much bridge the different experiences I've had over the years in my research and try to come up with this whole idea of how can I further the field? Like, we're transitioning towards like the future of energy, right? We're trying to, decarbonize a lot of sectors. We're trying to make a lot of things better. What role can I play from the academic side of things to be able to train the future chemical engineers who are going to be solving these future problems? And the teaching, as I said, the research and the mentorship, all of those things are important.
Absolutely. Now, what entices you closer to academia versus industry?
So I'd say that like I'm equally, I'm not even equally like I'm interested in both industry and academia. But when it comes to academia, what really entices me in academia is just the environment that I've been exposed to, right? I've never worked in industry. I've never done an internship industry. So I can't necessarily speak too much. I can't necessarily speak to what it would be like if I was in industry, but I'll speak to the fact that I'm enjoying where I am now in the academic environment. The fact that you get to have your own group, the fact that you get to collaborate with people in academia and industry, the fact that you get to pretty much train people that had no idea of what research is.
Right.
And then you try to build them through the whole process. And then they get to a point where they pretty much become collaborators with you and not necessarily mentees. So that's one thing that really entices me about this academic environment. The ability to train people and make impact in these little ways. I think that's what really entices me.
Okay. Awesome. Yes. So we're going to move on to the next section. This is called the B points. These are the best practices. Okay. And they may not be the best, but they may have been best for you. Okay. So what is the secret sauce to your success? You've made it, all the way here. You've been in America for 10 years. I imagine that's had its challenges and some adjustments. So what is the secret sauce to your success? What's something that you accredit the most?
Honestly, what I'll credit the most, I'll say it's community. The reason why I say community is that when the going gets really tough, when you feel isolated, when things are not going as well, the fact that I've had community to fall back on, that's been important. And when I say community, I'm talking about, a loosely defined aggregation of my family who are back in Nigeria, who are different points at different parts of the world.
Right.
I'm also talking about my peers in the different programs I've been in. I've had a group of friends who have pretty much kept each other going. We've also talked about just, random people that I just meet at different parts of the colleges, right? Like in my undergrad, I was good friends with the director of different centers, of the Africana Center, the International Center. These people really, friends, mentors, they really helped me. They were part of my community. And I also just think about the fact that, even in my, my group, my labs, that I've really worked in, we've all helped each other out. And all these things I've really enjoyed. So the fact that I've had all these people really make up my community, that has been, I would say, the secret sauce. Obviously, there's always the individual perseverance. There's always the fact that, you have to pretty much know what you want to do, or at least what you desire to do, and then set your eyes on it. So at least the fact that I've just told myself, okay, I want to get to some of these goals. Some of them are realistic, some of them are idealistic,
Sure.
But I just shoot my shot. And then, with the community, it all comes together and some things work, some things don't work out, but that's the way it goes.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very important. I think sometimes we see ourselves as singular people at first, I'm me and I'm going to college and I got to do this, but it's really the community that really brings it all together for us and pushes us to be successful. I credit even my PhD to my family, my friends. Everybody had a hand in that. So as much as it's a celebration of me, it's a celebration of everyone. And I was just talking to someone today about how important it is to have your team. And your team doesn't necessarily need to be in the same location as you, right? Yours is in Nigeria, yours is close by too. And all of those people have an impact on your success, whether it be an emotional side, whether it be, a intellectual thing. Everybody has a part to play here. So that's your secret, is your community. Were there any strategies, any things that like you used like to become successful? Like, did you like read more? Did you like do jumping jacks in the morning? Like what helps you like stay focused, stay locked in, and stay on this path?
I would say when I was much younger, like in high school, let's just say like I just felt I was good in things. I didn't really have a clear direction. I wasn't really planning. But I would say after spending, a year feeling like, okay, yeah, I didn't make quite the right choice of what I wanted to do. Sure. I had to like take a step back and then use the next year to recalibrate myself. Mm-hmm. So it was during the process of recalibration that I started doing more like looking forward. Mm-hmm. So one thing that has really helped me, I would say, is just like planning. And when I say planning, I don't mean like go plan everything down to the very detail. It's just like having some like high level idea of like, where do you want to be at specific points in time? So that's when I just, realized, as I told you before, that I realized that, back then I wanted to do a PhD at some point. This was back in 2019. This was like, way ahead of time, right? So the fact that I have some of those clear ideas really helped. And even when I got to my undergrad, the fact that some of the mentors I worked with also helped me to really plan. And when I say they helped me to plan, is that they told me like, hey, Sopuru, what do you want to do in 5 years? What do you want to do in 10 years? What do you want to do in 15 years? And I was like, I don't know. They were like, go write it down. Next time we meet, come back. And it was this whole exercise on and on and on that really pushed me towards thinking about, wow, I can actually plan things. And when I came to graduate school, it was pretty much the same thing. I started thinking about like, how do I make the best out of my PhD program? And, I've been lucky enough to have, a nice group of advisors. I work on different projects, but my, core advisor, he's someone that like, he always has like at least some clear plan. And just like learning a lot from him has really helped me a lot. So just the fact that I sometimes just write things down, just like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And then I like try to go for it. Now I'll tell you like, it's not always as easy as it seems, right? A lot of plans that I've, made didn't actually go according to plan. And part of it is something I know I'm also working on, right? I'm not perfect in this. It's like when you make a plan, or when you make a goal, like, you hear about the SMART goals, like how do you make it smart? So this is something I'll say, like, I'm also using the near future to work more of like, how can I make plans that are much more specific, much more actionable, right? Much more measurable, much more timely, right? So how can I make those plans and like, what are the specific details? It's not just like saying, hey, I want to be here. It's just more of like, where do I need to take the first step before I take the next step? You don't need to have the whole idea, but you just realize you just need to figure out the first 2 steps and then just talking to people about those steps. They pretty much can even help you fill out the rest of the way. So that has pretty much been it for me. Like the little planning that I have to do and the fact that I usually like, circle myself with like a nice community that also like helps to, fill out the rest of the steps to the specific goal I want to be. That has really helped me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's nice to have a good starting point. It doesn't mean that your plan is the finalized thing that comes to fruition, but it gives you a starting point versus being lost and aimless. I think that's the most dangerous thing to be in life, is aimless with your decision making. I know some people would disagree with me. They're like, oh, life is, organic, you go with the wind flow, and, all this other stuff. But I do like a good plan initially. It doesn't mean that plan has to be the end all be all, but it's nice to have something to kind of guide you in some type of direction that makes sense to you. So we're going to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane. All right. I'm going to ask you advice at 3 points in your life. Okay. And hopefully it's not too far away from you. So as a high school student, as a freshman in college, and as a first year grad student, all right, I want you to think about some key advice that might have made things a little bit easier for you now. Obviously, you made it through and everything winded up okay. But what kind of advice would you give yourself as a high school student? And then we'll work our way back up.
Okay, I'll stay with high school. The advice I would give myself would be, don't wait till after I've graduated high school to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. So that advice would have been, hey, by my 11th grade, even from 10th grade, like have a clear idea what you wanted to do. Like talk to people that actually do what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Because that's the mistake I made. Like I didn't talk to people that did what I wanted to do or what I thought I wanted to do. So start talking to people. Yeah.
Did you have anybody that you knew that did chemical engineering? So I think that was hard,
so
right?
The funny thing is, like, I heard of a lot of chemical engineers, like these people worked in the oil and gas, but I didn't know anyone directly, right? My family were not, academics. My parents didn't even go to school, right? So it's more of like, I didn't know people, but I knew of people.
I see.
So
and maybe you're saying you could have reached out to
reached out to those people that I knew of. And then at least just by talking to them, I have a clear idea about what's involved. So that's the advice I would have given myself in high school because I would make a much clearer plan of what I wanted to do.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to move forward to freshman year of college.
With freshman year, the advice I'll give myself would be enjoy college more. When I say enjoy college more, try to understand who your resources are. Try to pretty much like connect with people. I connected with people, but I feel that there's some people I could have connected with on a deeper level, right? And we pretty much all went through, and I just realized I literally had resources next to me, but I just didn't know how to utilize them. So I'll say, this is definitely tough to like tell someone who literally just moved from Nigeria straight to college,
Absolutely.
But I'll say that in a way, if I was going to cheat and go back in time, I'll tell myself, okay, hey, let's just assume like you know how to settle in, go reach out to some of these resources, go try to like think about how you all can really interact, how you all can really keep each other going. Like you have a lot of these resources in administration,
creating a better community.
Exactly.
And yes. Yeah. I think that's something as you go through grad school, you notice the need for community, the need for networking, right? Sometimes it's not all about what you know, it's who you know, right? So I think that's a very great point there. All right. So now we're at your first year of grad. What would you advise yourself?
My first year of grad program would have been like, I stress less about the first year. I'll say the first year was pretty tough. Most people around me would have been like, Sopri was easy for you. No, it was really tough. I just didn't show it externally, right?
Yes.
Because, you had all these classes that you're taking and
yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Let's just say I wasn't doing a lot of sleeping in that first semester. And then I finished the first semester and it's like, okay, you have your qualifying exam in 9 months. And it was another grind, right?
Yes.
It's a system I cannot change, right? But I would say what I would have told myself would be like kind of stress less and then figure out what is the most important thing that you need to do to get you forward. Because sometimes, let's just say I was putting a lot of energy into things that weren't gonna get me too forward. So at what point are you going to decide, okay, I have 2 homeworks, exams, project study for like, how can I just say, I'm just going to spend 2 hours on this. I don't care what I do. And then spend maybe like more time on something that's actually going to get you more forward.
Absolutely.
So that's something I wish I would have known because it would have really helped me to stress less.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful way to think about the problems of grad school or even at any level, actually. Sometimes you have a lot of different assignments worth different levels of points, and some don't need the same amount of attention. No offense to whoever's making the course, right? But like, you got to think about this, what's the most important thing here? If time is a factor, right? It's time is a limitation.
It is a limited resource.
Exactly.
You cannot allocate equal time to everything. You have to optimize.
I can't add 50 more hours to a day, right? And so I have to optimize myself. I wish there was more time, but obviously I need a little bit more time in this actual area. And I think that's very, very important. So I think those are some really great advice that you would have given yourself. All right. So this section right here that we're going to go to, this is called the excellent takes. All right. And so we're just going to take some broad topics and get your take on it. So as you were an international student, I imagine transitioning from Nigeria to Boston to Purdue, that had to come with its challenges. Maybe going from Boston to Purdue maybe wasn't as challenging, but going from Nigeria to Boston had to be very challenging and like a culture shock. So how can international students probably better transition to like this lifestyle of being from their home to American university better?
So I'll say like everyone is very different, but I'll say what really worked for me. What really worked for me was that a lot of schools have, I'm not sure of every school, a lot of schools have these pre-orientation programs before the orientation. And I found that very valuable because during the pre-orientation program, I actually got to meet a lot of the other international people. And I also got some Americans because Americans also do the program. Later on, they rebranded it in my undergrad as global orientation. But that was very helpful because think about it this way. You have people who are struggling the same way you're struggling. And there's always like that motivation in like the common struggle.
Yeah, the common
Right?
struggle for sure.
And you also have Americans who've been in America, and you also have people that, okay, wow, you all are friends now. And then they actually help explain to you, you know, how to actually get a phone plan and all these little things. Because let's just say like things were pretty quite different in Nigeria and then coming here. And the fact that I just didn't really like get enough time to like do at least some adulting in Nigeria, I had to literally like come of age, do adulting and everything here in America. So having, programs like that at different school, geared towards like, people from different international countries, need this, especially from Nigeria. It really helped a lot. Another thing was, there are some resources that can help you too. So a lot of schools have things like international centers. Some of these international centers are usually very helpful. Sadly, sometimes some schools don't really allocate a lot of resources for a lot of different reasons, but these are very helpful. Just reach out to them. Sometimes just talk to them. They can really help you. This is one of like the advice I would give myself in terms of how do, transitional and at the level of undergrad. In graduate school, it's a little bit different because most grad students I've really talked to. So I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of grad students who came straight from Nigeria to do their grad school. And some of the common challenges you see are people like trying to find a house, trying to like, find transportation, like a whole lot of other things. And sometimes they have to do a TA in their first semester. So one thing I've really learned that really helps to make the process easier is that as soon as you learn that you've got an admission into a program, pretty much start laying the groundwork, start figuring out which people in that specific program had a similar situation as you. And sometimes you can find them on LinkedIn. Literally just go and find out like, oh, who is from Nigeria that is in this program or even in the school. And they can give you a lot of tips on how to find housing. They can give you a lot of tips on like what exactly do you need to know to transition easily. So just having people that can really guide you goes a long way because you're starting classes. Just think about it. You come in August, like you're starting classes. You're trying to like do all the registration, SSN, everything, and you don't even have time to even figure out the process. And
you got to get an ID, right?
And you have to be like a TA. It's just starting to think about this ahead of time really helps a lot in the transition. Those are like some of my like takes.
Okay. And from, that perspective, I'm obviously from America. So therefore I don't have to necessarily go through some of those same transitions, but it would seem that I think maybe international students might need to be here a little earlier than August because you guys don't have the luxury of finding an apartment or a house that easily, right? Or there maybe some resources, and maybe there's resources at every school, but maybe, once they know that there are international students coming, especially at the grad level, like there being someone to facilitate those things, for the grad student on their behalf. Because trying to do all of that right before TA, and if you're TAing a course you've never TA'd before, there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. I know for me personally, I used to study the course. I used to do some of the assignments to kind of get a feel for what the professor was going to require and determine how I was going to grade and things of that nature. So, yeah, I think international students need to be a bit more proactive and like reach out and stuff like that. It can be very like hard to kind of like reach out to people and say, hey, I know you don't know me, but I'm going to be a student there in the fall. I just got an acceptance letter. Can you help me? And, some people are busy, and then some people, it's a lot on them too.
You just have to try different people and someone will respond.
Somebody will respond. So I think that's a good point too. I think it can be challenging, it can be daunting. And if you don't succeed, keep trying. There's going to be outside. There's going to be someone who, and I imagine there's got to be a international student that will feel your pain. Even if they don't have time, they're just like, man, I know this is hard. I'm going to help you out.
What I do, sometimes people reach out to me. If I don't have time, I tell them, okay, hey, I may not have time to help you figure this out, but let me direct you to like people that would help you figure it out. But I always try to ensure that like when someone comes to me with a problem, that I try to just like send them back. I try to either like maybe help them or like send them forward to someone else who can maybe help them solve their problem.
Absolutely. And I think some people hopefully don't be too hard on yourself if the person directs you to someone else. It's not personal. Yeah. It's busy for everybody here. So like, I think that advice to keep trying to hit people up and also don't take it personal that this person's not helping you directly. and that they are pushing you to someone else, they're doing this for your own good. Because, if I'm busy for 3-4 weeks straight and I say I'm going to help you, I'm going to be a little bit more flaky at really assisting you. So it's sometimes nice that someone can redirect you. All right. And so our last excellent takes question is for you, is that, when we're high school students or, undergrad students or graduate students, we're trying to get these academic jobs. We're trying to get these internships. We're trying to get to these industry jobs. What are some things that you think students can do to become more marketable for different scenarios, I guess?
Yeah. So I would say when it comes to being more marketable, the first thing is being aware that an opportunity exists, or being aware that there's such thing as being marketable. Because, it's sometimes surprising that some people may be like towards the end of their graduate program or undergrad who have never really thought about this whole concept of, in a way, you have to market yourself. I'm not saying you have to pretty much put yourself out and say, hey, I cost this amount. No, it's just more of say that, let me try to put myself in a position where I can really show you and really highlight the specific skills that I have, the specific opportunities I've had along the ways that would really make me valuable to you. So some of these things in terms of making yourself marketable starts from, Stephen starts from your undergrad in college. If you want to do academic jobs, just email a professor, ask them, hey, can I get a research opportunity? And sometimes even as having one semester of research opportunity can really open many doors for you, because when you're applying to grad school, it's very attractive when they see that you actually have some idea of what doing research is. If you want to do an industrial internship, you could say, okay, hey, let me just go maybe talk to someone in industry, see, can I get an internship, or can I even maybe do a little stint over a break or something, just to get an idea of what working in the industry is. So think about the opportunities that, the little opportunities that would help you gain insight into the future opportunities that you're thinking about, or the future positions you're thinking about. Sometimes making yourself marketable also means going for some opportunities that do not necessarily define, or that are not necessarily the same as this final goal. For example, if you know that you want to maybe go into industry and one day you want to maybe manage a team, right? An engineering team. How do you build teamwork? How do you build communication? How do you build management? Sometimes it's as simple as you have a lot of student organizations around. Some of them might be engineering related. Some of them might be more cultural related. Go for those specific, executive board positions. One of the things I did a lot in my undergrad and in grad school was I tried to really develop my leadership and communication and management skills by participating in these organizations that have very different goals that often align with mine. So I was able to develop all these skills of working together. I was able to seek collaborations that really helped me develop collaboration skills. So these are all the things that you can even do outside the engineering field to kind of develop those soft skills. And once you develop those soft skills, that's how you make yourself marketable.
I liked what you said. You don't know that you need to make yourself marketable until you're looking for a job. And you're because that's one of the main things, right? Well, how are you marketable? What distinguishes you from another candidate? And I think what people need to understand, it doesn't mean that you need to be mean to other people and put other people down so you can be the best person that shines the brightest. I think it's more so, like you were saying, on your experiences. Okay. Your unique experiences are what gets you the job here, and so, one of my things is sometimes in STEM, people will see each other as competition. And it could be really brutal out here, how people want to keep you down in order to push themselves up.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be like that,
It doesn't have to be.
What lands you the job is more so your unique experiences, right, and less about, any of this other stuff of trying to keep other people down, And then when I notice there's certain things about jobs, GPA is not necessarily brought up at certain times. After a certain point in your career, your GPA it's whatever. Your title means way more. That's your GPA.
And still pursue academic excellence while you can.
Oh yes, still push it, but because I know classrooms etiquettes can be a little bit cutthroat.
Yeah.
about not sharing knowledge and sharing information. People don't share knowledge because they want to make sure that they maximize their grade over yours.
I've seen quite a lot.
Yes. It can be pretty brutal. So I guess I want everybody to be excellent, but I want everybody to feel like we can still all be excellent without necessarily competing to that degree. So one, I think that was an excellent take on being marketable, those things that you can do. Think about it earlier on. We get so focused that like, what's the next step? Well, the next step is going to college. Okay, what's the next step? We don't think about the next step until it's at the end of that. So like, just like you said, you didn't think about what you wanted to do until like the end of your high school tenure, right? But that's very common with a lot of people. Yeah. So like thinking about those things a couple years before might help you set yourself up. You might have joined certain programs because you knew you wanted to potentially do chemical engineering. So there might have been like a high school program that you could have joined early on to get that exposure and that experience. Knowing things earlier you're now looking for certain things. So now that I know I want to do academia, I know there's future faculty programs. I know that there's grants out there for graduate students who graduated from their undergrad, within 3 years. I didn't know about those things until like I did an industry job for a little bit. And then I joined my graduate program and I had just missed the deadlines or the requirements that I would have been perfect for some of those grant opportunities and could have had my whole graduate program paid for, and that would have been nice. But yes, had I asked myself some of these questions earlier on, I might have been in a better position to receive those things and been even more marketable. All right. So now we're at the next section. We're almost to our closing piece, but the last section, if you have any questions, this is the Ask Dr. Harrison Smith any questions. So you feel free to ask me questions. All right. Now I will decline depending how crazy the question is, but no, I expect that they're going to be fine, but ask me anything.
So Dr. Harrison Smith, when you go back and look at your PhD,
sure.
Right? So this is like a 2-in-1 question. So was the beginning or the end, which of them was like more difficult? And then pretty much like in your first year and in your final year, like depending on the station. And then my second question to you, which is like a follow-up to that, is that what is the biggest challenge that you've faced in like doing your PhD?
The biggest challenge doing my PhD?
Yeah. And then how did you pretty much get through it or go around it?
All right. Years of difficulty. So the beginning was definitely hard too. The end is hard as well. And they're hard for different reasons. So I'm going to explain why they're hard and why they were difficult. And then I'm going to explain, I guess, which one I chose to be the most difficult. The first year was difficult, to your point, focusing on courses and like, I don't remember sleeping much at all. Like, I think I remember getting 3 hours of sleep or at times, but to that point too, the end of my PhD, I remember getting less sleep as well. So the beginning, it was just the courses. The courses were very hard, and time management, I think I could have focused on certain things more than I focused on other things. I think there were some difficulties I'll say that for the challenges. So there was difficulties because of the course loads in the beginning, and then there was difficulties at the end because I'm now having to ask this question of what am I doing next? And so to your point, had to ask this question earlier, and maybe there was a better way to prepare for what's after my PhD. And so I was having to ask that question while writing my dissertation, while, still analyzing data and still constructing my presentation and going to present at different conferences. So like, shoot. That's a hard one. I feel like they're equally hard and challenging. I guess if I had to say which one was more challenging.
But one doesn't have to be more. It was just more of like getting your perspective. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like it kind of folds on itself.
Yes.
Like the start pretty much becomes
yes.
You started something, now you have to finish it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. I say the ending was tough. The ending was, I think the beginning was the hardest though, if I had to answer that question, because I think the ending, was beautiful in the sense that things were starting to come together. Yeah. Like the research was coming together. I was starting to see the clearer picture to my research. It was a beautiful process. It was a little bit painful. Yeah, there was some sleep. There were some days like I looked like a zombie. I was definitely not sleeping. I was writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And then I was analyzing data. And then I don't know about you, but when you analyze data, you look at it from like multiple perspectives. You're like, is this the trend that we're seeing? Or does this mean this? Or could it mean this? And so you're like tug of war every day with your data type of deal. And so like that can be frustrating depending on how you think about it. But if you just think about it as just being an engineer and just having a little bit of fun with it, you know, it was actually cool to like see the data and to think about it from different perspectives. The only thing is, I think that I was like a little panicky about is like what comes next, you know? And there's the question of a postdoc or a question of going to industry or a question of going straight into academia somehow as well. So I think those were the difficulties. So the biggest challenges, I think I didn't do a good job of trying to build a community. And some of it you can say that like some people didn't try to build a community with you, but I could have done a better job of building community early on. And I would have learned a lot more from having that community. And I guess my excuse was there wasn't a lot of people who look like me. You know, when you see someone at Purdue from Nigeria, you probably gravitate to them. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
You have the same dialect as me. Are you from Nigeria? You know, and you just gravitate towards that. But what happens when that's not there? Okay. What happens when there's no one from Nigeria? And not even just no one from Nigeria, no one that looks like you either.
Yeah.
All right. It can be a little bit difficult to kind of try to gravitate towards people. Some of it is your own head, right?
Definitely.
And then some of it is because people really do shun you away. All right.
Sometimes they do.
All right. I had some interesting experience. I remember there was supposed to be a class assignment, and this student, I saw a student from the class. We were going on the train. I was like, oh, I recognize that student from my class, and I needed a partner for this project. And so I was like, oh, let me try to ask him. So I started, as we get off the train and walking towards the building, I walked to try to ask him this question, and he starts picking up the pace. And I'm like, maybe, you know, he's just trying to get the class quick, you know, because we're going to the same class. So I'm like, I'm walking a little faster. Then he breaks out into a run. I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, you know what, Brandon, that's just in your head. He really just must have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Then he turns around and he smirks. And I was like, okay, that wasn't in my head. But, you know, I let some of those circumstances deter me from trying to still build this community, because sometimes you never know. I'm not saying I make an excuse for the way people act. However, you just never know what some people's experiences are. And sometimes you have to go and show them and change their mind of what a person like you is about. And then I've done that. I've met some people and they're like, you're not what I expected.
Same.
I try not to go into the conversation about what you expected, but I try to just accept it as what it is.
I got that comment from pretty much like a lot of my, undergrad like colleagues, and they're like, "Oh wow!" So I didn't actually know. I'm like, well, let's just like let that slide. But I just, at least I was glad that we finally connected. That's
exactly, and that's the most important thing. I know sometimes we can get like very like upset, and I'm like, listen, let's let the important thing be the important thing. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yes, I wish I would have started because like towards the end of my my grad, I felt like I had more of a community, and that made it less painful. The beginning was hard because I didn't have a community and I was struggling. I was struggling so hard, but I didn't struggle as much in the end as I did in the beginning. Sorry. So I did learn that lesson. I just wish I knew it a little bit sooner, you know? So with that, we will be closing out this podcast. One, I want to thank you. This has been an amazing interview. I think it's important. Yeah, I know when I first talked to you, a little nervous because you're just like, oh, I'm just a grad student. I'm not. But I think people at so many different levels have so much to say. Even this conversation is different from the other podcast I did.
Yeah.
You have something to give there. And I think, even though you're not from America, I think everybody needs a voice, even international students. And so like, I think you can become one of the voices that guides the next person or the next person that looks like you to being excellent as well. So I just wanted to thank you again for coming on the podcast, being brave. I know it could be a little difficult as well. And so I'd like to take this moment to ask the audience to like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time for the next podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.